Welcome. Good morning to the podcast that we organize as ENZA, the European Net Zero Alliance. And I have the honor, my name is Jorgo Chatzimarkakis, to be the chair for the first 6 months of this year, but it's decisive 6 months. And I have also the honor and the big pleasure to welcome in our podcast Hildegard Bentele. We call her Hilde. That's the short version, and we know each other quite well. Hilde, good morning.
Good morning, Jorgo.
You are one of the MEPs in the biggest group of the European Parliament that is something, in German you call it Bollwerk. So it's the fortress of democracy in the European Parliament. Would that be a right description of your group?
Of course. I would also call us the powerhouse.
Yes, indeed, it's the biggest group, and so powerhouse. But it's very, very important also to defend democratic principles, because we see that, well, new powers come up and play a role there. And so welcome for the re-election, first of all, although it's some time ago. And you were in the last mandate responsible for critical raw material as a rapporteur. For our people, for our audience here, describe what does a rapporteur do and what's his responsibility?
Yes, a rapporteur is dealing with a special legislative file for its group. I'm the spokesperson for the EPP group and the negotiator on this special file, but I was also the rapporteur for the initiative report, because this is how it started. It started with an initiative of the Parliament that we, after COVID and disruption of supply chains, saw that we need to be more independent with regard to our supply of critical raw materials, mainly also because we wanted to implement the Green Deal, and the Green Deal and Digital Deal needed a lot of raw materials. We had a lot of analysis about it, and this is why we said we need to become more independent. And the Parliament, made a first initiative report, and then the Commission followed up with a law, actually, and I negotiated this law, and I was also the rapporteur for the initiative report, and I continue to be the representative of the whole European Parliament on the CRMA board. The board is a very important body because it implements the Critical Raw Materials Act. Currently, it is selecting strategic projects, European projects, with which we want to strengthen mining in Europe, but also processing, recycling and substitution. And in this regard, I will continue to work on critical raw materials for the next 4.5 years, the whole term.
I cannot avoid to allude to the actual situation where we saw, well, historical and geopolitical shifts and changes due to critical raw material. Mr. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, did not want to sign an agreement with the US on critical raw material last week. And this led to enormous changes also in identity of us Europeans, in understanding that things change. So critical raw material, is that the new oil? Because wars have been conducted in the past for oil and for energy. Is it now about critical raw material? How would you see it?
Yeah, it's a lot about resources. I mean, this stays resources, critical raw materials are very important for new technologies, for defense technologies. And this is why we have a race after them. And the situation is like that China has secured its access to critical raw materials long time ago, 10, 15 years ago, also on the African continent, in South America, and so on. And let's say Europe is certainly a latecomer. The United States are aware of that, but they have on their own continent a lot of resources. Also in Canada, there are a lot of resources. But since they started to lead a new policy, they have to be more robust in securing their access to resources, and they are kind of blackmailing, as we know, Ukraine now. And I have to tell you, I'm really impressed by how strong Zelensky reacted. But I, also being a diplomat, I think there will be an agreement on minerals. Also, the British Prime Minister Starmer made it clear that there will be one, because the idea is also, and this is also the idea about the Critical Raw Materials Act, we want to develop resources sustainably in a responsible way, and also to the benefit of the partner countries. And since Ukraine is very rich in critical raw materials, it can also help the Ukrainian economy a lot if Western technology comes into the country and helps to access these resources. But I think also Europe, and we have a strategic partnership with Ukraine. It was concluded in 2021. We should also follow up. Until now, we just did some regulatory reforms and some research projects, and we did we implemented data digitally and so on. But we have to come up with real projects. But the problem, of course, and this is again a problem of resources, they are currently in the areas which are still war zones. So access to critical raw materials is always difficult, also if you look to the African continent with regard to the DRC and so on. So it's really hard to find reliable partners and good partnerships, because they have to be developed for 10, 15, 20, 30 years.
Are we there? So with your report and your role in general, you described you were initiating the report, then the report and the law came, and now you are in the board, basically, of a body that supervises all that. Yes. Congratulations. So I'm personally very, very happy that one person could develop an expertise and now use the expertise in, well, fighting for our interests here as Europeans. But where are we in real terms? I mean, we had the strategic partnership with Ukraine, fine. Then President Trump came and said, I want it. We witnessed Mr. Zelensky's reaction, and we are now in a situation where most probably they will sign this. Are we out as Europeans?
Yeah, very good question. It's all about money. It's all about money, because the way the Americans approached Ukraine was that they want to establish a big investment fund. So it's about, and 50% of the, of the benefits of the Ukrainian raw materials should go into this fund. I mean, that was the idea. And this is the actual, thing we talk about. We need money to use our resources and to process them and so on. And this is the crucial point which we were lacking until now. There is no EU fund for critical raw materials. There are just 3 national funds in Germany, in Italy, and in France, each comprising 1 billion euros. This is something, but really not a lot. So we need to attract a lot of private money, but we need to leverage this. And in this regard, I think, and this is a long-standing experience which I could gain in the last 5 years, mining, extraction, processing, recycling needs a lot of investment. So we need to put money on the table. The United States did this in the past because they were considering it from a defense angle. And I think here, we could really, because we talk a lot about defense, and NATO put forward now its list of 12 critical raw materials important for defense. So I hope we can make the raw materials issue again an issue on the European agenda, and make clear that we need investments, that we need, first of all, a public kick-off money to make these investments happen.
Well, I would like to stick to money and the very, very historical situation where on one day, Mrs. von der Leyen, Commission President, announced basically a huge debt orientation of the EU. I'm not criticizing that. To the contrary, I think it will be similar to the pandemic, big
next generation EU.
Yeah, next generation EU, and it's similar amount. So it goes up to 800 billion. At the same time, in the same day, the German upcoming government, they didn't even form a coalition, but it's led by Mr. Friedrich Merz, who is in your party. So we didn't mention that you're not only in EPP, you are also in the Christian Democratic Union in Germany, announced something which nobody would have expected, a 500 billion fund, basically for investments into broadly defense, but
infrastructure.
It's also infrastructure. So is there, with these two big announcements that make me happy, because I think if you back this up with real assets, it's an investment into the future. But is there a role there for CRM, for critical raw material, for this strategy that you just mentioned that we urgently need?
Well, I think, it is about strategic investments in our security. And in this regard, I would frame it, because the whole idea about CRMA was about diversification, security, securing supply chains. And, resources, critical raw materials are important for defense, but also for our other industrial sectors, but future-oriented sectors. And we see the hard battle about them. So if we do not, become more strategic and invest and become an actor in raw materials policy, because we are currently not yet fully, but we have to become an actor, because China is an actor, the US is an actor. So we have to become an actor. So this is a very decisive moment, and I would do my utmost to put the issue of raw materials on the agenda, also of investments into this sector, because we also need a European mining industry, because we were phasing it out and we have to reactivate it to a certain extent. It is difficult, but if we look into Ukraine, we still have a existing mining sector which needs modernization. And that would be such a win-win situation if we invested, in the Ukrainian sector, which would be beneficial for the European independence and security in supply chain. So we need to be very smart. There's a lot of money out there now, or potentially out there, but we need to be very smart to invest it better, I would say, than with the next generation EU, because to my assessment, also to the assessment of colleagues in the European Parliament, we didn't have a good overview for which purposes, member states would spend that money. And this should not happen again, because we live in different times and we can invest a euro only once, how we say in Germany.
Well, I was just saying, because we both know each other quite well. During Corona time, we were waiting in front of the school where our children went, and we had a lot of talks, because our children could not enter the school immediately. They had to wait. So we spend a lot of time there. We have children. So if we now take debt, a high debt, 500 billion, 800 billion, we burden future generations. So this goes without saying, our children, basically, we know that. Now, my question is, and I put now my head of the ENZA chair on the European Net Zero Alliance, could we at least link these investments to a future-oriented resilience, or a future-oriented innovation that makes us more competitive? So just to invest into tanks, I don't know, or infrastructure as such, maybe not the right way to do. But if we link it to, now comes my little hydrogen hat, to hydrogen-based fuels in airplanes that are used by the army, in tanks, in ships. This would have this element of future-oriented innovation. Could we make sure that this happens? So could you in the European Parliament take a little bit step up in your role in controlling the Commission, in looking that they really concentrate on these kind of things?
Yes, definitely. I mean, this is also how I understood Friedrich Merz during the campaign, and when we, reformed our party agenda. It's all about making the economy grow again. And we can only grow if you invest into innovation and future-oriented technologies. So, of course, we need to invest into our basic infrastructural needs, how our bridges look like, how our railways look like. I mean, this is basic things. But it's very important that we keep a part of all these investments for future-oriented investments. And I think on the European level, we have made clear with the competitiveness compass, with the Clean Industrial Act, that we did the groundwork to do this. We said these are the sectors which are future-oriented. I can tell you, I was having a hearing on fusion technology. I'm working on a biotechnology initiative report now these are all, sectors or ecosystems where Europe is still competitive. Also, I'm also working on the Environment Committee on water issues. We have a water sector which is growing about 5% per year, and which is a front runner globally. So even before the US. So we have to concentrate. We cannot do everything. So we have to concentrate on these sectors, and hydrogen is certainly a part of it, where we are still technologist leaders, but we have to pay attention that we are not overtaken by others, because they invest more currently and they scale up faster than we do. There's a lot of awareness at the European level, and I'm very glad and happy to bring this awareness back to Germany, into my party who will govern, who will present the chancellor. But I know that there's a lot of openness. Maybe the concepts are not yet there, but there's a lot of openness and awareness for this question, that we have to invest now smartly.
Well, I have a very simple question, because if we want to strengthen resilience, that's what we do. Have access to critical raw material, or at least resource them out of ourselves by recycling. I think the Clean Industrial Deal that was presented last week, also by Ursula von der Leyen. I had the honor to be in Antwerp to listen, to discuss, and there we have a quota of 25% of recycled CRM. We are at the moment at 11%. This is good. This is very, very good. But if I go back and would say resilience, fine. Can we turn it into sustainable resilience, and sustainable in a double-fold way? So it's not just this green thing, sustainable. It's also a long-lasting resilience, but that would entail a different approach. That would entail that we say, okay, sustainable resilience means that we stick to Green Deal elements like offshore wind. We see that offshore wind turbine will not be deployed in the US. Why don't we get them here? So there are a lot of companies who left Europe because of Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, and we could get them back. Would that be a smart strategy? I'm also asking because the European Net Zero Alliance looks for all these technologies that now might be even strengthened due to the situation, but we possibly need to look for new partners. US, difficult partner. India, possible new interesting partner. After the Clean Industrial Deal was launched, Mrs. von der Leyen with the college went to Delhi, had geostrategic bilateral talks, was received with a hydrogen bus, by the way, because the Indian government puts a lot of impetus on that. So sustainable resilience, does this sound good? And is that a good strategy?
Yes, it certainly is. And I think you are absolutely right. Also, with regard to the future of our children, we should not, should not oversee now the sustainability aspects and our climate goals. I mean, this is for sure. And I can also say for the EPP and also for the Christian Democrats back home, we don't challenge the goals because, if you look to Europe in general, there are quite some questions about if climate change is that important, but the EPP is steadfast in this regard. And I think you're absolutely right, because the world combines sustainability and innovation. And I'm very glad to hear about your experience about India. We talked about it. I know about it. I just can add to this. I became also the chairperson of the EU-Israel delegation, and Israel is super innovative. It's a small country which has to be resilient by itself, so they have to bring upon a lot of innovation, and they are at the forefront with regard to startups and so on. Also super innovative, super competitive, have a growing economy. So we should look into these countries, what are their experiences, and partner with them for sure. Because we have seen, as you said, the US, which used to be an important partner, is not anymore. It's not an ally, it's a competitor, it's a rival. We also have to, I think the development with Canada is very decisive. They have resources, they have technology, they are losing a market currently, in the US. So they always look to Europe. So as you said, we should look at strong partners, and there are many strong partners out there. And this is now the important task also for diplomatic, new foreign economic policy. We try to shape this also, that we get more also with the Middle East, there are huge projects in terms of, this IMEC corridor, to bring energy from India actually to Europe. But we have to lay the grounds, the pipes and the railways, and to complement the small pieces which are still missing. But this is what I mean. We have to do it smartly. We have to be open for new ideas, for new partners, but keep the sustainability and the future-oriented approach.
I have heard that Canada is looking for EU membership now.
Is it okay? It goes that
well,
far.
I had talks to people from Quebec this week, and it's an interesting idea, though.
Yes, it is.
Australia takes part in the Eurovision Song Contest, so why shouldn't Canada be part of the EU? No, but honestly, the Canadians have such a smart reaction now to this US threat by buying Canadian. And I mean, we should also look into elements like that in general. It reminds me the Münchhausen effect. So in Germany, we have this Baron of Münchhausen who pulled himself with his hair out of the swamp. So, and we have possibly to do it ourselves as Europeans. We need to buy our own steel. So if there is a public procurement for bridges, you mentioned bridges, or for railway system, or for tanks. So why don't we use our own steel, which could be clean steel? We have this lead market concept. And I think we need to be much more, not
patriotic.
Patriotic, future-oriented. I mean, why should we give up on that? No. I have one last point, because we come to the end of our podcast, but I have one last point that could possibly highlight how we could distinguish ourselves from other parts of the world and find new partners. Data centers. So data centers are a very hungry and growing energy demand.
Energy hungry,
And we need them, because artificial intelligence, we might like it, we might not like it, will exceed the energy demand in the next years to a very high extent. So our data centers, and we have meetings with them as the net zero industry and the hydrogen industry, they say, we have money, we have clients, we have a strong future, we don't have a reliable grid. We need a backup that helps us if the grid is not delivering energy,
fluctuating,
to give us the flexibility and the sovereignty. And this is where hydrogen steps in. So my question is, could we integrate this whole system of data centers that are also part of our security? I mean, of course, we need that. If data centers are gone, our whole economy doesn't work. Could we integrate that into this bigger defense, new defense idea? So we could basically work upon autonomous, sovereign, onshore energy islands. And we also might use waste for that. So plastic waste to hydrogen is a fantastic way via membrane pyrolysis. Plasma pyrolysis. We can split plastic into hydrogen, clean hydrogen with high temperatures, and carbon solid. And this carbon solid is also the ground for graphite and graphene. Very, very critical and needed critical raw material. So what I want to say is, if we have a totally different approach, waste to hydrogen for data centers, to put it very short, is that something that you would support, you could support in our strategy to keep the objectives, but to be much more flexible in using technologies?
Well, I think these are actually the projects we need. We have the possibility under the Clean Industrial Act to create this kind of valleys, these clean industry valleys, and I think it's now the ingenuity of MEPs or of regions to come up with these kind of ideas. And I'm very glad that you bring it up, because we discussed it for Berlin. You remember, that's my constituency, and we have data centers are to be installed there. And actually, that's the problem, that there is no, independent or sufficient energy source. We have hydrogen-ready infrastructure and technology there, but to bring all this together in a concept, I think that's the important idea, and we need now policymakers on all levels, at the European level, at the national level, but also regional level, to present these ideas as projects to the European level, where we have increasingly more possibilities to get these projects funded. So this is what I mean. We need to be very smart and to combine all our ideas which are already there and present them and make them best practice cases of which other, member states, other regions can also learn. And I think Germany, and I would say as a proud Berliner, also Berlin offers a lot of possibilities for these, schemes you just described.
Yeah, Hilda, I was yesterday in your constituency. There was a big hydrogen forum there. I visited it. I had the honor to give a keynote and be on a panel. I visited also a company, Siemens Energy, with the electrolyzer production. And
Yes.
there's not so many industry in Berlin, but
there is turbines which are H2 ready.
Exactly, turbines and electrolyzers being produced there, the most modern you can get in the world. So
yes.
you can be proud of your constituency. However, I promise that we will explore on that data center experiment with net zero energy technologies. So in your constituency, I promise that. But we need also, to be honest, your support. So if policymakers don't shield to a certain extent these kind of innovative approaches,
yes.
Drill baby drill is not the option.
No.
Not for us. But we need your support, and of course, I think it's a chance. So it's a good opportunity for us to get into the future. Thanks very much. Any last words you want to say? And the last thing you want to say?
No, I mean, I fully agree, but I think the challenge is also to bring these ideas we are discussing at the European levels. And I have to say, this is what I learned in the last 5 years. We are really front runners in many ways, because we see, developments in the future much faster and in a more global way. So I think the main challenge, and this is what you are doing, what I'm doing, to always go back to the national level and, teach them or, make them aware that we have to take bold decisions now, and to invest now and create these projects now, and not to wait until it's too late, because this is a kind of also German attitude, to wait until there's no more risk and everything is fine. But we have to take risks, we have to take bold decisions. And this is, but I also feel a little bit empowered to, push our colleagues on the national and regional level to make these bold decisions. And I'm glad that we always join forces, dear Jorgo, in this regard.
Excellent. Thanks very much indeed. It was interesting to look into what Hildegard Bentele is doing in the European Parliament. It's a very powerful person, especially when it comes to this critical raw material. And also congratulations to your role vis-a-vis Israel, a very, very decisive and interesting role that you have overtaken there. Hilde,
thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Yeah. We will continue in real life. Thanks for this insight.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.